And that's also why he takes great offense when we distort it. Hey everybody, I'm Amber, a disabled gal, here to reveal or remind you that you're complete in Jesus Christ alone. Most, if not all, premarital sex talks overlook a very important aspect. Before I get into exactly what that aspect is, I want to make a disclaimer. Please do not think that I am advocating for premarital sex. The Bible makes it clear that sex is to be within the covenant of marriage between one man and one woman. That covenant actually reflects a greater reality of Christ and his bride, the church. So essentially, marriage and even our sexuality represents the gospel. Ephesians 5 verse 31 and 32 puts it this way: "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. Anything outside of this design, which includes premarital sex, is sexual immorality. Since sex has such a high significance of reflecting the gospel, God cares greatly about it. And that's also why he takes great offense when we distort it. So now that I have that long disclaimer out of the way, let's get into why you clicked on this video. The thing that's left out of the conversation when talking about premarital sex is the barriers that is placed before disabled people to get married. If you have never researched it, I encourage you to. This may be the very first time you're hearing about it, but yes, there are a lot of obstacles in the way of a disabled person getting married and staying married. I'm talking about things outside of the disability itself. The barriers I'm talking about are barriers within our laws. To sum it up for you, basically, when a disabled individual gets married, they are risking their life. And that is not an exaggeration. I wish it was an exaggeration. Now, if you're unfamiliar, your minds probably went straight to benefits. I want you to understand disability benefits encompass more than just a check that is often below poverty level, by the way. A crucial part of disability benefits is actually medical care and caregiver services. That is why I say it is not an exaggeration that our life is being put at risk. To be eligible for caregiver services, depending on what state you live in, your income and or your assets need to be below a certain amount. When you get married, your spouse's income and assets are attributed to you. So their income and assets are going to count against your eligibility for caregivers and other medical care. Now, without these essential services, yes, our life is actually at risk. People do indeed die from lack of caregiver services and medical care. I also want to note these are services that are not covered on private insurance. Even though they are essential to our health and safety, they're still not covered on private insurance. So sure, the disabled individual might be able to get on their spouse's insurance plan, but that's not going to, supplement what they lost by getting married. That private health insurance is not going to cover their disability care. Now, many Christian churches teach that the only way to be married in the eyes of God is to be married, under the law, to be legally married. When the church, disability, the law, and marriage are involved, as you can see, this creates complication for the disabled individual and their spouse. Now, for the Christians who do believe you must be married in the eyes of the law, let me ask you this. Do you think the intention of Romans 13 or 1 Peter chapter 2, was to put vulnerable individuals such as myself, to put our lives at risk in order to be married. These chapters actually talk about not punishing someone for doing good. The role of our authority is actually to punish the wrongdoer, not to punish the vulnerable person for getting married. When someone is a true follower of Christ, they're going to have a desire to please God above all else. So if we're told that marriage doesn't exist outside of the law, that leaves us with pretty limited options. Either you have to be independently wealthy and able to afford your disability expenses, which most able-bodied people wouldn't be able to afford. Or second option, not get married. Or third option, get married and risk your life. Now there's a fourth option. We can have a marriage ceremony before God without government involvement, but then many Christians will still say that we are fornicating. They will say, you know what, without that contract, you don't have a covenant. Mind you, these are often people that did not have to risk their life to get married. Let me ask you another question. Is there anyone in America who has to risk their life to get married besides disabled people? I'll wait for an answer. Now, I do realize there are martyrs of the faith. That is still going on today. But this is not a typical martyr situation. This is actually, the church is almost offering up disabled people on a platter because they're holding to some extra biblical rule so strongly. Does the Bible teach that disabled people must be martyrs to get married? Are we holding disabled people to an unbiblical and extra biblical standard? Also, who has the authority to decide who is and who isn't married? Is it the state, or is it the one who created marriage in the first place? Now, thankfully, there is legal effort being made to either mitigate or eliminate these marriage penalties or punishments. It will likely be a long road ahead, though. Devin and I are actually going to Washington, D.C. pretty soon to attend an event on disabled marriage equality. It's going to be a symbolic mass commitment ceremony, saying, hey, we need disabled marriage equality. Regardless of religion, under our Constitution in the 14th Amendment, everyone is supposed to have the fundamental right to get married. Now, obviously, I do believe that this is an example of a violation of religious freedom as well, because as we discussed earlier in this video, it definitely conflicts with what a lot of religious leaders say. Even though the Bible doesn't specifically pass over the authority from God to the state over marriage, not getting legally married still interferes with your ability to practice your religion. And that is because it's such a widespread belief that God requires legal marriage. As far as the legislative efforts to end these ungodly policies, unfortunately, Christians are silent on them. Can you think of one non-disabled Christian influencer who has ever addressed this topic? If you have, please let me know because I would love to watch it. It's just not something people are really talking about because they're like, well, it doesn't directly affect me, so I don't really care, which that is not a good attitude for Christians. Please get involved in whatever way you can to stop these ungodly policies. They are not only bad because they put vulnerable people's lives at risk, but they also are insulting the gospel. When you're making it difficult for people to get married, that is offensive to God. God designed marriage. It should be celebrated, not punished. Getting married should not be a reason for slow capital punishment. And please, 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 Christians, Stop gaslighting believers who are disabled, who are trying to get married. You are putting an unbiblical, heavy yoke on them. I can tell you, after being married for over 2.5 years now, this has been the number one stress. Constantly having to go without proper care is not good. You know, it's traumatic enough that these disgusting, disgraceful laws even exist in the first place. Don't add spiritual abuse on top of it. And I don't say that word spiritual abuse lightly. This is a legitimate example of spiritual abuse because you're putting something that God does not require on us. Here's how it goes. We are told the only way to not be considered fornicating is if we have this government contract. We get said government contract, which will be a detriment to our health. The church does absolutely nothing to try to change these laws to make it not a detriment to our health. It's actually mainly secular disability activists who are fighting for marriage equality for the disabled. And then to add insult to injury, the church does not offer support when we lose our caregiver services or other disability support. Maybe some church out there would, but from the Christians I've talked to, they have said that that's not the church's job. It's just a cycle of unbiblical yuck, and I don't think God appreciates it. Hey, future Amber here. I just wanted to point out that Social Security does have something called the holding out rule. Essentially, what this means is they can treat a couple who is not legally married as if they are legally married. I find just that very name, holding out, to be insulting. You're holding out on us, huh? Don't you know we should be punishing you? But anyway, you may be asking, okay, Amber, so why is this whole video even relevant? What does it matter if a couple is or isn't legally married if they're going to be punished anyway? Why not just go ahead and be legally married? The holding out rule does not always affect Medicaid and Medicaid waiver caregiver services. It really depends on a lot of factors, especially what state you're living in. It's not uncommon for people to move to another state just so they can qualify for caregiver services because their state they don't qualify in. So there are a lot of circumstances in which someone might not be eligible for Social Security benefits, but they're still eligible for Medicaid waiver caregiver services. In those instances, getting legally married can put them at risk of losing their caregiver services. I know that this is all very confusing and you don't have to understand all the ins and outs. Just trust me when I say, or even just do your own research, that being legally married can often jeopardize the disabled person being eligible for health caregiver services. So that is what's left out of talks of premarital sex. As people who love the Lord, we don't want to dishonor him in that way. But yet there's this huge unbiblical obstacle that a combination of the government and the church is holding us to in order to have a God-honoring marriage and sexual intimacy within that covenant. Our authorities don't even treat the marriage contract like a God-honoring covenant anymore. I'm not really sure why, at large, the Christian church is still saying that that is equivalent to a godly covenant. Not only equivalent, but you have to have that contract in order to have a covenant, especially in this instance when vulnerable people's lives are actually on the line. My heart goes out to any other disabled person who is a Christian or even, other religions who are in this situation. This is a totally unnecessary problem that nobody should face. Let's all come together and try to end this marriage inequality. This isn't some progressive social justice issue. This is an instance where we need biblical justice and we need biblical compassion to protect vulnerable people. Also, we need to protect God's design for marriage. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video was edifying to you. As you can see, this problem is, it hits very close to home for me, so I genuinely appreciate you hearing me out. Thank you so much also to my supporters. You guys really do make a huge difference in this ministry, and God bless you all.
The video you just saw was made by fallible Christians.
Although we diligently seek to represent the God of the Bible accurately, please understand that we are still being sanctified.
For absolute truth, please refer to the Bible.